Good afternoon. It's good to see everyone today. Appreciate your presence. We are blessed to be able to come together and to sing some songs of praise to our God and to encourage each other. I do want to make just a few very brief announcements. Frida Barnes continues to have problems with her eye. Kathy Huntoon is also having eye trouble, and she'll be going back to the doctor on Friday. David Fulton had his second therapy yesterday. We want to continue to remember him in our prayers. The therapy is not easy, and so please keep them in your prayers. Jim Shelburne is not feeling well this evening. Sister Trevino, the same, not feeling well. Ruben Agana is feeling some weakness, and so that accounts for their absence. Jaden Villa had a little accident earlier in the week. He pulled a cup of soup from the microwave, and it did a pretty good number burning his chest. He's here tonight. He's doing okay. Still in some pain with that, but we are pleased that he's doing all right. Also, we have several that are going to be gone. The Almarezes are going to be gone about 2.5 weeks. The Becks, the Sarazuas, the Ashcrafts, and the Holts are going to be traveling this weekend. Just a reminder that Group 2 will have a quick check-in this coming Sunday. That's Group 2. If I've overlooked anything, if you would let me know, and I'll try to get that in the news portion. I do have one more thing left I want to make mention of. I put it on my phone and didn't put it down here on the paper. So Joshua Smith's baby, Matthias, they're on a trip right now, and he accidentally got into some prescription medicine and evidently took some of that. He is in Flagstaff right now in pediatric ICU, staying the night. They feel like everything is going to be fine, but they are keeping him overnight to make sure. So let's remember the Smith family. They have been gone on vacation, returning home, and so again, let's remember them in our prayers as well. All right, if you have something more that you'd like for me to include Sunday, let me know.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you. Please mark number 12 for the Song of Invitation. And let us turn to number 45. Number 45. Come thou almighty King, help us thy name to sing, help us to praise, Father all glorious, o'er all victorious, come and reign over us, ancient of days. Come thou incarnate Word, bear on thy mighty sword, our prayer attend. Come and thy people bless, and give thy word success. Spirit of holiness, on us be men. O Lord our God, to thee the highest praise is due, and evermore thy sovereign majesty may we in glory see, and to eternity love and adore.
Good evening. Before I begin, I just wanted to thank the elders for the opportunity to be up here to give y'all tonight's invitation. One of the great problems that many face in service to the Lord is the fact that oftentimes we develop a casual attitude towards God. And while it may be easy to see this problem in others, it is not so easy to see in ourselves. That's why, for tonight's lesson, I looked up the definition of casual and will compare it to the actions that we may take for our actions tell our attitudes that we take. The word casual, as defined by the American Heritage Dictionary, going from, if you were to look it up, top to bottom, definition number 1, suited for everyday wear or use, informal. Certainly this brings to mind the clothes that we wear. We should not be casual in our choice of what we wear, simply because our clothing reflects our attitude. Our dress simply ought to be such that it reflects our respect for God. First, it ought to be decent and orderly, modest, and not pretentious. And secondly, it should be appropriate to the occasion. It's obvious that one will dress differently depending on what one is doing. A person might dress one way to play sports, another to pour concrete, and yet another to worship God. Yet, in all these things, one can dress decently and orderly, modestly, in an unpretentious manner. Still, one would not properly wear their good clothes to pour concrete in, nor their coveralls to play sports in, nor should such wear clothes that they would usually wear for sports to worship. Definition number 2 reads, showing little interest or being nonchalant. Many are casual in attendance even though they merely miss a service. Many of the Lord's children hold to the secular idea of just going to church as opposed to assembling with the saints to accomplish God's purpose. The simple act of attending in itself is casual service. So many people think that they are serving God simply by their physical appearance. They don't think that the fact is that their mind is miles away has anything to do with it. Brethren, this mindset itself is casual service. Definition number 3 reads, occurring by chance or accidental. There is no way anyone can serve the Lord by accident. Our service must be from the heart and based upon truth. It must come from a heart that is submissive to the will of God. Yet, many continue to try to serve the Lord in which is convenient to themselves. They expect God to adjust to their schedules and to their likes and dislikes. They offer what is left over of their time, their abilities, and their money. They do what they think is right, in a manner that they think is best. And in doing so, they place themselves not in the role of the servant, but of the master. The fourth and final definition I have for this invitation tonight. Occurring at irregular intervals, not planned, occasional. The obvious thought that comes to mind is that many are casual in their attendance of the assembly, meaning that they just simply don't show up. They tend to let anything, or nothing at all, keep them from assembling with the saints. But what about our study of the Bible, prayer, teaching the lost, and such things? Do these things occur at irregular intervals, go unplanned, and therefore are done only occasionally? This is casual service. Brethren, we must keep guard against becoming casual in our service to God, for God simply will not accept casual service. I leave you with this verse from Matthew 22, verse 37 and 38. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. If you find that your service to the Lord has become casual, or if you feel that the need for support and guidance to deepen your commitment, we encourage you to seek help. If there's anyone in the audience who needs assistance from the elders, or is ready to begin their life anew under God's guidance, please come forward as we stand and sing the song that has been selected.
All day long, Jesus, I am singing. Is my soul that joy will ever be? All the while He keeps my heart bells ringing. For His love is everything to me. Is my King, and oh, I dearly love Him. Is my King, no other is above Him. All day long in rapture praise I sing. Is my Savior, He's my King. Streams of love around my soul overflowing. From His heart, love's everlasting spring. That I sing. He is my King, and oh, I dearly love him. He is my King, no other is above him. All day long in raptured praise I sing. He is my Savior, is my King. In his light I'm going home to glory, with the souls who trust his saving grace, going home to sing and tell his story. In the blessed sunshine of his days, he is my King, and oh, I dearly love him. He is my King, no other is above him. All day long in raptured praise I sing. He is my Savior, he is my King.
I will go to the Lord in prayer.
Let us pray. Lord God in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity to learn about your word, and we appreciate this opportunity to worship you as we just have done. We thank you that we are safe here in America to worship you. In other lands, that may not be so. May our ears be open and our hearts open to hear what the teacher has to give us from your word. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Sorry?
Not too much time to read. No. There was somebody had a whole routine, probably from the 1950s or 60s, and it was, the deal about Sarah being a smoker. She lit her camel, left on her camel, and he brewed was, the coffee, and there was just so yeah. I remember there's just one that just a whole routine. Let's get going. Here we go. Roseanne's passing out pages 6 and 7. If you're actually keeping these things or looking, you don't have a page 5. And that's because I didn't like my page 5 last week, never passed it out. And then when you start up on your iPad again, it's already up to page 6, So there is no page 5. And somebody did ask about the size of the print. And the reason it's that way, and it's because I couldn't make it any bigger. But I have an optometrist appointment on Monday, so I'm sure my vision will improve with the next set of glasses. Okay. We're ready to start tonight in chapter 6, verse 17. We'd gotten through some other discussion about some of this, I think. But I want to remind you that, the Hebrew writer is trying to warn these people. He's trying to encourage them and bolster their confidence, of course, in being Christians. And he's fighting directly against the Judaizing teachers who are trying to reel people back into Judaism. And so all through this, as we go along, keep that sort of big picture in your mind that he's making, really he makes 4 different cases in Hebrews about the superiority of the new covenant, the new law, the priesthood, all of these things. And so here we've gotten to verse 17. And if you remember, let's just start. Verse 13 says, "For when God made the promise to Abram, since he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself." And the idea was that God's promise, we're so used to as people. We want guarantees. We want contracts. We want oaths. We want promises. So God, of course, there's no greater than he. So it says that to assure his promise, God gave an oath. But he's swearing by himself, which seems like an odd concept to us maybe, but that's the assurance, the constant assurance that they get. And then in verse 17 it says, in the same way, God, desiring even more to show to the heirs of the promise the unchangeableness of his purpose, interposed with an oath. Okay, who are the heirs? We are. Ultimately, we are the heirs to the promise, right? Okay, so that's what he's telling them. He's telling the Hebrews, you're the heirs to this. And it says then in verse 18, in order that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we may have strong encouragement, we who have fled for refuge and laying hold of the hope set before us. Okay. He promised, he made an oath. How does this give us, and the New American Standard uses the term strong encouragement. I know it's different in some other versions, but what's that idea about this strong encouragement for them, for the heirs, for us?
That God keeps his promises.
That's it. Just it's that simple. They believed, they knew God would keep his promises. Just that simple. You know, if you fully trust in somebody and they say, I'm going to do this for you, whatever it happens to be, you don't even sweat it, right? If I know that I can trust someone, if I have complete confidence in them, then wow, how much more encouragement do you need? I know it's going to happen. Brian?
My understanding is that the two immutable things that God is presenting is for the benefit of mankind. And so mankind is in the practice of then, when they really want to bring a point home, that they are going to swear. I swear on the Bible that I will tell the truth and stuff like that. So my understanding of what those two immutable things are in which he cannot lie is, number one, that he promised, and then number two is that he made an oath.
That's right.
That he would, of this promise, so that there are both of these things then for which he cannot lie and people can have confidence in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The oath, the promise, and God can't lie. So you have this strong encouragement. And that's what he's trying to give these people. He's trying, you know, they're facing persecution, they're facing these Judaizing teachers. And so he's trying to tell them, look, you can have confidence in God. And of course, the example here is with Abraham, about how God had promised those things to Abraham, and with faith and patience, he inherited the promises. And that's what he's telling them that they have got to do. And then, verse 18 there at the end, he says, we may have strong encouragement, we who have fled for refuge and laying hold of the hope set before us. And I ask there in the questions about fled for refuge, first of all, how literally had there been a fleeing of refuge for these people? Well, what happened when the persecution arose? They fled. They scattered. There was a dispersion, really, that ended up going all over the Roman Empire, ultimately. There were Jews. It's remarkable when you see, well, when you read the New Testament, you get a pretty good idea. But, you know, if you look historically, the Jews were everywhere. Everywhere there were Jewish communities, and there were Jewish Christians that spread the word. So they really, literally fled for refuge. They fled for their lives. Now, figuratively, what's the fleeing? If you take it from a figurative sense. Larry?
Flee from the world of undeveloped indecision, questionable, to what is permanent and forever.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, you know, we flee. we flee from the world. We flee from its lusts, from the immoralities of the world, all of those things like that. You know, there's multiple times in the epistles of Paul where he says, flee, whatever it happens to be. You know, the idea is, and when you flee, you know, that's not, you know, Elijah just used the idea about being casual. Does the word casual or fleeing come into the same sentence? When you're fleeing, you know, when somebody says, boy, they fled the flood, you know, or they fled the fire, they fled the oncoming army, it's not this sort of casual idea. It is, boy, when you flee, you are desperate to get away. Say again, Mark? Yeah, you talking about Potiphar's wife? Yeah. Yeah, he fled. That's right. Left his cloak behind, right? Yeah. But I mean, you know, if you've ever been involved in a situation where you had to get out fast, you understand that sort of heart-stopping, you know, adrenaline-pumping deal of fleeing. That when we flee for refuge, we are fleeing from the world. And we're supposed to get away from it as fast and as desperately as we can. Unfortunately, as we know, a lot of people want to toe the line, you know. Wonder how close I can get to the world and still be okay. That's the opposite of the idea of fleeing. So, if we're the heirs and, you know, the idea of fleeing there, we who have fled for refuge in laying hold of the hope set before us. And now I'm not even going to remember what lesson. Yeah, was it last week? Terry had mentioned about your grandkids holding on, right? You know, you see a kid swinging around. They're holding on. Yeah, look what it says here. It says, we who have fled for refuge in laying hold of the hope set before us. And of course, the hope set before us is, what's your hope? Say again, G? Resurrection. Yeah. In heaven. That's the goal. That is the ultimate hope that's set before us. So the idea is, boy, you're fleeing and you have laid hold. You have got hold of this hope at the end. And again, remember, he's trying to encourage these people. He's really trying to tell them what you've got. All right, so, and then he goes to an illustration that says, this hope we have as an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Finally gets back to Melchizedek here. Okay, so the first image is of what? An anchor, which is for a ship, right? Ship is anchored, it holds steadfast, right? The idea is that, you know, when you're with an anchor, it holds the ship. All right. And then he says, steadfast, or sure and steadfast, which, by the way, the song, will your anchor hold? This is it. This is where it comes from, right here. Will your anchor hold? And it says, you know, sure and steadfast. And then he switches here. And this is the maybe more interesting part of this. He says, both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us. So the imagery is changed here, and it's gone to what? Brian?
Back to the Holy of Holies, or not back to, but going to the Holy of Holies that he's going to talk about a little bit later.
That's exactly right. This is sort of that, yeah. He's talking about when he says the veil, going into the veil, that's the idea of that Holy of Holies. And again, remember, he's talking to Jewish Christians. All of the imagery would have been very clear to them. You know, I don't think anybody would have had to say, well, you know what that means or what the veil is or whatever. But he says, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us. Okay. We don't need to look at it, but it's in Leviticus 16:15, where and the rest of that chapter in Leviticus, which talks about the idea of the high priest entering the veil. But we've already discussed it a little bit. Now, it says here that which enters within the veil, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us. Okay, what's a forerunner? Somebody goes before. Who do you think of first? John the Baptist, right? As a forerunner. He was the forerunner for Jesus. It talks about that in Luke 1. That he's the forerunner. He went before Jesus. The idea of a forerunner, of course, is somebody that's going for a purpose. He's not just doing it haphazardly. This is for a purpose. Jesus has entered this veil. He is a forerunner. He's gone before us. And our hope rests within the veil. Now, what do you get out of that? What do you see out of all of that? Go ahead, Larry.
Reversal back to what God said, that it is by me that I swear. You can't get any holier than the Almighty. It's
Okay.
right back.
All right. Okay. What else? Just
Gives us someone to follow.
a forerunner, by its definition, means you're following. Yeah, he's going ahead. He's not going ahead and you're going the other direction. Yeah. So take a look. It says, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever. Okay. He's gone before us. The veil and this idea of the hope being anchored within it, the Holy of Holies, all of that is going to be tied in with this idea of the priesthood, of course. Everything is tied in. And we're, like I say, we're fixing to get into Melchizedek right now. Brian?
I was just going to refer to a later verse.
Oh, Hebrews 10?
Actually 9.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hebrews 9, verse 24. For Christ has not entered the holy place made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So,
Right. For us.
Yeah, he is in the presence of God. He is our advocate. He is our mediator, and he is in the presence of God. Basically, he is our priest in that position and capacity.
Yeah. He is our priest. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Yeah, that's what's being drawn here. He is our priest. Now, what's going to be the problem for Jews making Jesus a priest? What's going to be the problem, Michael?
He's in the wrong family.
Yeah, he's in the wrong family, the wrong tribe. The priest can only come from Levites. That's it. Jesus is from the tribe of Judah. So, when you're presenting this to these Hebrew Christians and you're trying to get them to understand all of this, you have got to figure out a way. You have got to have a way for them to understand that Jesus is a high priest, but he's not from the Levites. And that's where Melchizedek, of course, is going to come in here. Now, you remember back all the way in chapter 5 that the writer had built up to Melchizedek. And then he says, you're not ready for this. And then he goes through the rest of 5 and into 6. And he starts off first saying, well, you're dull of hearing. For the time you ought to be teaching, you've got to be taught the fundamentals again. He sort of chews them out a little bit. And then in the latter part of chapter 6, he's building them up again. And he's saying, there in verse 9, he says, but beloved, we're convinced of better things concerning you and things that accompany salvation. though we are speaking in this way, and then he says, hey, God knows your good works. He knows how hard you're trying and all of that. I think this is just a masterwork of getting somebody's attention, and then right before they crater or whatever, after being chewed out a little bit, he's saying, but, I know you're trying, you're doing good works. This is, it's really great stuff. And so now he says that, and now he goes back into talking about Abraham, and then right here at the end, he reintroduces Melchizedek. He says, where Jesus is entered as a forerunner for us. Well, hey, how can Jesus go into the veil? He's not a Levite. Having become a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. And now here he goes. He goes right into it now. He's cooking with gas here. Chapter 7. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham as he was returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham apportioned a 10th part of all the spoils, was first of all by the translation of his name, King of Righteousness. That's what Melchizedek means. And then also King of Salem, which is King of Peace. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, he abides a priest perpetually. Okay, so before we leave all of this, I wanted to read that. But do we all get it? The last question I've got on page 6 there. Logically tie together the concepts of the veil, the high priest, and then the idea of Jesus with the order of Melchizedek. Go ahead, Marcus.
It just strikes me interesting, and when Jesus died in Matthew 27, the veil was rent on his death, the earthquakes. People talk, right? There's no way that Jewish people didn't talk about. It's not said to us, but we know the nature of people.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%.
So tying it to the veil and to the high priest and the tearing of the symbolism of that would be very impactful, I think, if you're trying to get that imagery.
I think you're right. It all ties together. And these folks would have certainly known about the veil being rent. And then all of this, like say, the imagery that's here. Oh, yeah. These people have grown up with this stuff, as far as understanding Judaism. And so I think it would have been much more powerful for them. All of that imagery, all of this. So here we go now. Are we all okay with this? Can we see where this is all going? Where the Hebrew writer has got to convince these people and show them that Jesus is, you're right, Jesus isn't a Levite, but he's our high priest anyway. And the example, of course, is going to come from Melchizedek, who, Melchizedek is just this mysterious creature, because we've only got this little bit of him. But we get more in Hebrews about Melchizedek than you do in the Old Testament. So he says here, all right, so now he's gone into this, and Abraham received a blessing from Melchizedek, and Abraham gives Melchizedek a tithe. Who's the greater of these two people? Oh, it is Melchizedek. It is. Now think of the esteem of Father Abraham and the import now of Melchizedek. Yeah. Melchizedek blesses Abraham. Abraham gives Melchizedek a tithe, not the other way around. And so here we've got Abraham, when he's returning, like we read those verses before when Melchizedek was first introduced. And we've got Abraham giving him a tithe and all of these things like that. And then here we've got verse 3, talking about Melchizedek, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, he abides a priest perpetually. Okay. Is Melchizedek an alien from outer space? Is he no father, no mother? What's the deal here? What's really being said about Melchizedek? Is this a miraculous birth or something? What's the point?
Father, the Jewish father,
Okay.
that they considered very important. And here Melchizedek is, we have no knowledge or information about his family except, like you said, what little is given. And so it's turning it again upside down for the Jews. You know,
Yeah.
we don't have this figure to look to now.
Yeah. The value, like Terry just said about with Abraham, hey, the value the Jews put on genealogy, your tribe, all of that. Oh, this is so important. Boy, this is it. This is how you really establish yourself. And you have this guy, what it's saying is we have no history about this guy. We don't need a genealogy for Melchizedek. We don't need to know about mother, father, no genealogy for him. Appointed by God, and there is no value to any genealogy for Melchizedek. There is none. Go ahead, Brian. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Who else wants to add to that? Royce, did you flinch there? No? Okay. Go ahead, Michael.
I think it's interesting that it doesn't say if that means King of Peace, and it was also King of Jerusalem, that it doesn't really say anything about either of those.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, the King of Peace, which of course, typically when we hear the Prince of Peace, we associate with Jesus, right? Yeah, King of Righteousness. I think if you just ask the average person just off, and said, well, who is that? They would say Jesus. And here it's being addressed as Melchizedek. And of course, that's purposeful as we're going to see the parallels, that, the term type that we always hear about. All right, so here we've got, like Terry just said, it's been turned upside down. This guy's got no genealogy. There is no value to his family. We have no idea about his family. Nothing. Zero. And we know nothing of his death, nothing of his demise. And so what the writer's going to go as we get into this is going to be the idea that this is a continual priesthood. It doesn't have to end. Okay? Go ahead, Mike.
Could it, I know it's a stretch, could it be that Jesus was Melchizedek?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think there's a type, and he is in the priesthood of Melchizedek. But I don't think you could do that exactly. Go ahead, Griff.
Curious what you make of kind of the latter part of verse 3 where it says, "But made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually."
Yeah, I think, and it's sort of going to fill in a little bit on this later. But yeah, I think it's the idea that unlike the Levitical priesthood, that first of all changed constantly. Aaron dies, Eleazar comes along, or whatever, and that priesthood really was not a continual priesthood, not perpetual. And I think that's part of it, is the idea when he says, made like the Son of God, he abides a priest perpetually or continually, I think is some of the versions say. Anyway, yeah, I think it's the idea of comparing the inferiority of the Levitical priesthood, which comes to an end, and the perpetual priesthood that Jesus is a priest forever for us, in the veil, all that time. Yeah, that's what I get out of it. Mark?
I was just thinking, we kept pressing the point regarding continually. Even though Abraham is gone and so is Melchizedek, but it's still going on, Jim. They're still, they're alive, not on this side of eternity, but our salvation, our souls still live on. And I think that was relatively new, to the Jewish mindset at that time.
Well, and that concept was presented, by Jesus when he said, he's not the God of the dead, he's the God of the living. You know, that's the concept. Yeah. Yeah. Brian?
I think we've talked about this before, but I get the sense that just because of the lack of information in the Old Testament, that Melchizedek was almost seemed incidental. And yet, now with this explanation, it's like God has set this up from the get-go as to who Melchizedek is and what he represents and who he becomes the type for. And it's like, wow, here is this connective tissue that's been there all along. And it's like, wow, God set this up, and God cannot lie, and God promises, and because he set this up from the get-go, then I can have confidence.
Yeah.
High priest Jesus.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it, maybe, is about connective tissue, because you know how it is. Everybody's had this deal where when you're learning something and you've got this bit of knowledge and you got this bit of knowledge, and you got this over here, and then all of a sudden the light comes on and you go, oh, I get it. You know, and you get the whole picture. And yeah, I think that's what we're getting here. When I first was studying weeks ago about Melchizedek a little bit, there was a whole sort of Jewish offshoot, not an offshoot exactly, but there were people there was a mysticism revolved around Melchizedek. Yeah, that some of the Jews had sort of developed this sort of mystical thing about Melchizedek. Yeah. You know, he's this mysterious figure and, you know, all of that. Yeah. Which I guess is not surprising. People do that. Anything that is never fully explained, they immediately build something around it. And they sort of had, some Jews had that idea. Yeah. Okay. So, so here it is, verses 4 through 6. Now, observe how great this man was, to whom Abraham, the patriarch, gave a tenth of the choicest spoils. And those who indeed of the sons of Levi, who receive the priest's office, have commandment in the law to collect the tenth from the people, that is, from their brethren, although these are descended from Abraham. But the one whose genealogy is not traced from them collected a tenth from Abraham, and blessed the one who had the promises. But without any dispute, the lesser is blessed by the greater. And in this case, mortal men receive tithes, but in that case, one receives them of whom it is witnessed that he lives on. And so to speak, through Abraham, even Levi, who received tithes, paid tithes. For he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Boy, you Jews really think you're something special? Before you were even fathered by Abraham, he had paid tithes to Melchizedek. Wow, you talk about the superiority of Melchizedek and his priesthood. You see what a great logical case is being made here? I mean, you know, you really think the Levites are special? Before you were fathered by Abraham, he'd already paid tithes to Melchizedek. He had been blessed by Melchizedek. So, you see, and well, I'm doing my own questions, but it's easy to understand why the Levitical priesthood is really inferior to Melchizedek. It's not perpetual. It doesn't go on. It's not dependent upon a genealogy. And those Levites, yeah, they got tithes all right from the Jews before the Jews ever came along. Father Abraham, the patriarch, had already paid. So, boy, I think the Levitical priesthood is gone. That's what's being shown here. Okay, comments now. Go ahead, Larry.
On this circle, here you have Melchizedek, and then you have all those years of priests, and then finally Jesus completes that circle and completes God's purpose.
Yeah. And now you get this great understanding about how we're going to have this prophet and priest and king. all in one, because it doesn't exist under Judaism. It doesn't exist under Judaism like that. And so, yeah, like I say, it's just the way that the case is built and presented is so good. I mean, it is just so good. Those Hebrew Christians, when they're first reading this, with the Judaizers maybe nipping at their heels, trying to drive them back into Judaism, and boy, reading this and just going, wow, I get it now. I get it. I asked there the question, where were the Levitical priests when Abraham was paying tithes to Melchizedek? They didn't even exist. They hadn't been fathered yet. Okay? All right. And then, comments or questions now about any of this? Go ahead, Trish. I just said comments or questions about any of that part. Okay. So, here we go. He says, there, verse 10, of course, says, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Now, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, on the basis of it, the people received the law, what further need was there for another priest to arise, according to the order of Melchizedek, and not be designated according to the order of Aaron? For when the priesthood is changed, of necessity there takes place a change of law also. There it is. We're changing the priesthood. The law's got to change. For the one concerning whom these things were spoken belongs to another tribe, for which no one has officiated at the altar. We just said it before. Jesus is from Judah. Yeah, he's not a Levite. For it is evident that our Lord was descended from Judah, a tribe with reference to which Moses spoke nothing concerning priests. And this is clearer still if another priest arises according to the likeness of Melchizedek, who has become such, not on the basis of law of physical requirement, genealogy. You don't need that heritage, but according to the power of an indestructible life. Again, wow, what a contrast. The Levitical priesthood, those guys are dying off. They're getting their tithe from the people through the law. And now you have this new priest, this new high priest that comes along with an indestructible life, a continual priesthood. Seems to me, if I was a Judaizing teacher and I was being faced with this, it'd be time to leave. Because there's no value in the Levitical priests according to this any longer. There was a value at one time, don't get me wrong. But now, there isn't any. Comments here? Sure.
Melchizedek gave the best from the spoils.
The best. Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah, which I naturally would assume of Abraham. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you would just naturally assume. Could y'all hear what Terry said? He said that Abraham gave Melchizedek it says, the best of the spoils. In other words, he gave him the cream, the top. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Larry.
When they were confronted by a Judaizing teacher and they could use this argument, the Jewish Christians, we know that some of those Jewish scholars were lacking, because how many times did Jesus say, have you not read the scriptures?
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of them would be just simply befuddled. And the others who knew the name would have to scratch their heads and go back to their books.
Yeah. Well, and Brian, you use that term connective tissue, but it's really true. There was so much that they didn't quite have down right. They just, like you said, were befuddled by it, or they didn't quite understand it. Boy, all of a sudden, now, Zechariah 6 just is crystal clear. You know, you don't have to say, well, what do he meant by that? All of a sudden, so many passages are just crystal clear about what was meant and where they were going to, how all the dots got filled in. You know, and of course, it's easy for us because we've got this. But boy, I understand why they were befuddled by some of it, why at times they really didn't quite get it. You know? Yes. Go ahead, Eric.
Just a little change here.
Okay.
Mention Bulverde tomorrow night in the.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot to do that.
Yeah. Bulverde on Thursdays nights is having their one night a week meeting, I guess you'd call it, at 7:30. And do you know who's speaking tomorrow night?
Jesse Garcia.
Jesse is. Jesse's preaching tomorrow night. A lot of us, of course, friends with Jesse. So he's preaching tomorrow night at 7:30 at Bulverde. Yeah, they do that all through the summer, but it's a great little, like I say, one night a week meeting. Michael?
I was just thinking another comparison between Abraham and Jesus. In the New Testament, Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am.
I am, sure. Oh, yeah. Okay, we're done. We got people need to go get children, I know. Thank y'all. If you'll read that last part of chapter 7, that's where we'll be going to. Thank you.